Something I've been noticing is that a lot of women feel like their hormones are just off, but they can't really point to why. It's not always something obvious either. It's more like your body just starts responding differently than it used to. Your cycle might shift a little, your energy doesn't feel as steady. Maybe your skin starts reacting in ways it didn't before, or your weight changes and you can't really tie it to anything specific. And usually, what people hear at that point is that their hormones are out of balance. But what doesn't really get talked about is what's actually creating that imbalance in everyday life. Because hormones don't just decide to do their own thing randomly, they start responding to patterns. They respond to what you're consistently eating, how your body is processing energy, how often your blood sugar is going up and down, your stress levels, your sleep. All of that is connected. And food is one of the most consistent things your body is dealing with every single day. So when something feels off hormonally, it's not always about one specific food being the problem. It's usually about patterns that don't seem like a big deal in the moment, but over time, they start adding up. One pattern that shows up a lot is how often sugar is coming into the diet, but not in obvious ways, because most people aren't sitting around eating candy all day. It's the sweetened coffee in the morning, maybe again later in the day. It's snacks that seem light but are mostly sugar and refined carbs. It's drinks that feel normal to have every day but are still spiking blood sugar over and over again. And the issue isn't just sugar by itself, it's what keeps happening to insulin because insulin is a hormone too. So when blood sugar is constantly going up and down, insulin is constantly being triggered to respond to that. And over time, that starts affecting how other hormones are regulated. That's where you start seeing connections to things like irregular cycles, increased cravings, energy crashes, even changes in how your body stores fat. And because this doesn't happen overnight, a lot of people don't connect it at first. It just feels like your body is changing. Another thing that gets overlooked is how refined carbohydrates are showing up in everyday meals, not even in an extreme way. Just normal foods that people eat without thinking twice about it. Bread, crackers, pastries, certain cereals, snack foods, things that don't feel like sugar, but once they're in your body, they break down pretty quickly into glucose. So you end up in a similar cycle. Blood sugar rises quickly, insulin follows, and then not long after, you feel that drop again. And when that keeps happening, your body starts adjusting to it in ways that don't always feel good. That's when you start noticing you're hungry again, not long after eating, or dealing with cravings that feel harder to control, or you're tired in the middle of the day, even if you've slept. And a lot of times, it doesn't feel like a hormone issue. It just feels like something is off with your energy or your appetite. But those systems are connected. Something else I think people don't always realize is how much ultra processed foods can change the overall environment in the body. Because it's not just about one ingredient, it's about what your diet looks like as a whole on a regular basis. When a large portion of what you're eating is coming from foods that are highly processed, your body is working with less nutritional support overall. Less fiber, less micronutrients, more ingredients that are designed for shelf life and taste rather than nourishment. And over time, that can shift things like inflammation levels, not in a way that you feel immediately, but in a slower, more subtle way. And inflammation matters because it affects how different systems communicate with each other, including hormones. So again, it's not about one food being the problem. It's about what your body is consistently dealing with. Caffeine is another one that depends a lot on context because on its own, it's not necessarily an issue for everyone. But when you combine caffeine with stress, poor sleep, not eating consistently, or relying on it to push through exhaustion, it starts affecting cortisol. And cortisol is your main stress hormone. So if your body is already in a state where it's constantly trying to keep up, adding more stimulation on top of that can make it harder for things to regulate properly. That's when you start feeling wired but tired at the same time. Or you can't sleep well even though you're exhausted. Or you might have energy that feels inconsistent throughout the day. And then you need more caffeine the next day to get through it. That cycle ends up building on itself. Dairy is one of those things that doesn't have a simple answer. Some people do completely fine with it, others notice changes, and it's not always dramatic, but it's noticeable over time. It might be skin changes, bloating, or just feeling different in your body after consuming it regularly. There are some discussions and research about how dairy can influence certain growth factor pathways, but it's not something that applies the same way to everyone. What tends to matter more is whether your body is reacting to it consistently, because hormones are not one size fits all. So instead of trying to follow strict rules, it's more about paying attention to patterns. Another piece that doesn't get talked about, well, not talked about enough, is when the diet looks healthy on the surface, but it's still not providing enough nutrients. Because hormones need raw materials to function properly. Things like magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, B vitamins, omega 3 fats, these are all involved in different parts of hormonal regulation. And if those are consistently low, the body has to work harder to maintain balance. That doesn't always show up in obvious ways right away, it's usually more gradual. Feeling more run down, not recovering well, mood feeling a little off, energy not being as stable. And it's easy to attribute that to stress or lifestyle without considering that nutrition might be part of it. Alcohol is another factor that tends to get separated from hormone conversations, but it plays a role because your liver is responsible for processing hormones, including estrogen. So, if alcohol intake is frequent, that can affect how efficiently your body is able to manage that process. And on top of that, alcohol can also impact sleep and inflammation, which feeds back into hormonal regulation as well. So, it's not just one pathway, it is multiple things interacting at the same time. When you start looking at all of this together, it becomes less about individual foods and more about patterns that repeat over time. Most people are not making extreme choices every day. They're just following routines that feel normal. And sometimes those routines are what's creating an internal environment that makes it harder for the body to stay balanced. That's why it can feel confusing, because nothing seems obviously wrong, but something still feels off. And usually people are already noticing the signs. They can tell when their body isn't responding the way it used to, but without understanding what could be contributing to it, it just feels random, when in reality, a lot of it is connected. If you've ever started noticing changes in your body and couldn't really figure out what triggered it, or you felt like your hormones shifted without a clear reason, I'd be interested in hearing what that looked like for you. Because once you start hearing other people describe similar patterns, it becomes a lot easier to see that it's not as random as it feels. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and also share with somebody that could use this video to educate themselves and also figure out what might be going on with them.